Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on, well, possibly the single most crucial element of any story, a premise. And this deep dive, it's really built on the insights from, master storyteller John Truby, author of The Anatomy of Story. Specifically, his 10 key lessons for crafting a premise that really works.
It's funny, isn't it, how the premise sometimes feels like an afterthought, like just a quick summary?
Right.
But Truby makes such a strong case that it's way more than that. It's basically the blueprint.
Yeah.
It ensures the story actually has direction, depth, real emotional impact right from the start.
Yeah.
And understanding this stuff, it's not just for writers, I think. It's kind of a shortcut for anyone who loves stories.
Yeah.
Helps you get what makes them tick, fundamentally.
So our mission today is pretty clear. Let's unpack these 10 lessons. We'll pull out the big takeaways, maybe some surprising bits, and try to connect them to stories you already know and love.
Yeah, make it practical.
Exactly. So you can really see how these principles actually function in practice. Sound good?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Truby's first lesson. The premise is the DNA of your story. That sounds pretty fundamental. He talks about it like a building's blueprint. If it's weak, the whole thing just collapses.
It really is like that. Think about its functions. It defines the core conflict, right? It sets up the hero's whole journey, basically.
Okay.
And it guides every single plot twist, every major character decision. If you don't have that strong DNA, the story just sort of wanders aimlessly.
So it keeps everything connected, coherent.
Exactly. Coherent is the word.
So a practical tip here then is write your premise down before you even start outlining or writing pages.
Definitely. Get that sentence clear first.
And he offers a test too, right? Like if you try summarizing your story in one sentence and suddenly it sounds totally different from what you thought you were writing, that's a problem.
That's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
It means the DNA, that core idea, it isn't stable. It's probably unclear even to you, the writer, which means it'll definitely be unclear to the audience. Think about The Lion King, for example, the premise. A timid lion must reclaim his throne as king after being exiled by his evil uncle.
Okay, yeah, that's simple.
Right. But look what it packs in. Simba the hero, kind of reluctant, the conflict getting his throne back from Scar, the stakes implied, the whole Pride lands depend on it.
It's all there in one sentence, setting the stage.
Exactly. It's the code for everything that follows.
Okay, so if premise is the DNA, what are the absolute must-haves in that code? That brings us to lesson 2. A good premise must have a hero and a central conflict. Why are those two things so essential, like non-negotiable?
Well, because without them, who does the audience connect with? And what keeps them turning the page or, watching the screen?
Right, no anchor, no engine.
Precisely. You need someone to root for,
Right, yeah.
that's the hero.
Okay.
And you need something for them to push against, to struggle with. That's the conflict.
Okay.
But Truby adds a layer there too. He suggests the conflict isn't just some external bad guy. Often, the best conflicts actually reflect the hero's own internal flaws or weaknesses.
So the outer struggle forces inner change.
Exactly. That creates a much richer, more resonant story.
You see that perfectly in John Wick. The premise is basically a retired assassin is forced back into action when his dog is killed and, his past comes back.
Yep.
So Wick is clearly the hero. Revenge, that's the driving conflict. The Russian mob is the opposition.
Right.
But the internal conflict is him being dragged back into this violent world he thought he'd escaped. It promises more than just action, right? It's about the cost of that life.
Absolutely. That internal dimension is key.
So, okay, we have a hero, we have a conflict. But how do we make sure the journey feels, meaningful, transformative? That's lesson 3. The premise should show the hero's growth. How can one sentence possibly hint at a whole emotional arc?
Well, it doesn't spell out the whole transformation, obviously. But a good premise often hints at the starting point. It establishes the hero with a significant flaw, maybe.
Like what?
Oh, maybe they're cowardly or greedy or naive or maybe just stuck. The premise sets up that initial state.
Okay.
And that setup allows the audience to anticipate, even subconsciously, that the story's journey will involve confronting that flaw and changing, growing.
Right. You know where they start, so you're invested in seeing where they end up.
Precisely.
A Christmas Carol is like the classic example, isn't it? Premise. A greedy businessman learns the value of generosity after being haunted by 3 ghosts.
Perfect.
It nails Scrooge's starting flaw, greed, selfishness, and explicitly promises his transformation. You know from the get-go it's about redemption.
Exactly. The potential for change is baked right into the core idea, which leads us nicely into lesson 4. The best premises have high stakes.
This feels kind of obvious, maybe. Like, if the hero has nothing really on the line, why should we care?
It does seem obvious, but stakes can be subtle too. It's not always about, saving the world.
Right. Like in the Hunger Games, it's literal survival. That's pretty high stakes.
Definitely grabs your attention. But Truby points out that sometimes the most powerful stakes are actually emotional or moral.
How so?
Think about losing memories, like in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. That's a huge emotional stake. Or facing moral consequences, like Batman in the Dark Knight, compromising his ideals to save the city.
Okay. So when their integrity or their relationships or their very identity is threatened.
Yes. That kind of internal or personal stake can feel incredibly high for the audience because it's relatable on a human level.
What about the road premise? A father must navigate a post-apocalyptic wasteland to protect his son from cannibals.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The physical survival stakes are immense, obviously, but what really hits you is the emotional stuff, right? Protecting innocence, love, just humanity itself in a world stripped bare.
Exactly. It's about protecting the last spark of something good. The stakes couldn't be higher, really.
So moving on, Lesson 5 says the premise should be original or have a fresh twist. We see the same basic story types again and again. Hero fights villain, finds love, whatever. How do you make something familiar feel new? Is it just about being weird?
Yeah. Not just weird for weird's sake. Truby argues originality often comes from taking something familiar and twisting it, giving it a fresh angle that maybe reveals something unexpected or makes us see it differently.
How do you do that?
Well, you could combine genres in an unusual way. Like Zombieland, it's a zombie apocalypse, sure, but it's also a road trip comedy.
Okay, yeah.
Or you could reverse a common trope. Think Frozen subverting the whole Tulo's kiss thing.
Right, that felt really fresh.
Or adding irony. Like The Truman Show, a man's life is a TV show, but he doesn't know it. It recontextualizes the familiar to create something new.
I like the example of The Incredibles 2 premise. A superhero is sued for accidentally causing collateral damage.
Yeah, that's great.
It takes the huge, epic superhero world and slams it into this very mundane real-world problem, lawsuits. That juxtaposition is instantly intriguing.
It grounds the fantastic in something relatable and, fresh. And that idea of clarity connects to Lesson 6. The premise must be clear and simple.
The one-sentence rule again. Why is being able to boil it down so important? Does a complicated premise mean the story itself is doomed?
Often, yeah. If you, the creator, can't state the core idea simply and clearly, it probably means the story itself lacks focus. It might be trying to juggle too many main ideas, or maybe the central conflict isn't really nailed down.
So simplicity equals strength here.
Absolutely. It means stripping away the noise, getting rid of unnecessary details in that core statement, and focusing laser-like on the main character and their central problem.
Castaway seems like a perfect example. A man survives a plane crash and must stay alive on a deserted island.
Boom. Crystal clear.
Right. It doesn't mention his job, his fiance back home, Wilson the volleyball, none of that. Just man, crash, island survival.
Exactly. It distills the absolute essence. It's powerful because it's simple and visual. You get it instantly.
Okay, next up, Lesson 7. The premise should hint at the genre. Why is genre so important in that initial setup? People pick movies based on genre all the time, right?
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
Genre is like a promise to the audience. It sets expectations. If you pick up a horror novel, you expect scares. A rom-com, you want laughs and romance.
So the premise needs to signal that promise up front.
Yeah, it should give a clear signal about the kind of emotional experience or, the type of world the audience is entering. It sets the tone right away.
Makes sense. Like if the premise is a family moves into a haunted house.
You know it's horror instantly. Like The Conjuring.
Or a woman pretends to be engaged to her boss to keep her job.
Rom-com bells start ringing. The Proposal.
What about The Goonies? A group of kids discover an ancient treasure map and face deadly traps to find it.
Pure adventure. You know exactly what you're getting. Thrills, danger, discovery. The premise delivers the genre promise.
Cool. Okay, Lesson 8 is interesting. A strong premise often includes irony. What's the deal with irony? Why does it make a premise pop?
Irony creates this inherent tension, right? A contradiction or a clash that's immediately engaging. It makes the situation more complex and often more memorable.
Can you give examples? What kind of irony?
Well, there's situational irony where the situation itself is contradictory. Like Truby might point to Backdraft where you have firefighters, but one of them has this deep-seated fear of fire.
The job versus the inner fear.
Right. Or dramatic irony where the audience knows something a character doesn't. Think about The Departed. A cop who's secretly a gangster who's secretly a cop. The tension comes from that hidden reality.
Okay, got it. And the example used here is Grosse Point Blank. A hitman falls in love with his target.
Perfect irony, isn't it? His job demands he kill her, his heart demands he save her. That core conflict is fueled entirely by the irony. Promises dark comedy, maybe some genuine emotion.
It definitely makes you lean in. Which brings us to lesson 9. The premise should make people curious. How does it actually do that? How does it instantly hook you and make you need to know what happens next?
It often works by creating a gap in knowledge, essentially. It poses a really compelling question or introduces a mystery that your brain just wants to solve.
Like a what if.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What if toys came to life when nobody's looking? That's Toy Story. Instantly curious. Or it presents a baffling situation. Why is this person trapped? How did they get there?
Like the escape room premise. A man wakes up in a shrinking room and must escape before he's crushed.
Whoa. Yeah.
You're immediately hit with questions, right? How? Why? Can he? The curiosity is intense. It demands you find out the answers.
It creates an itch you have to scratch by watching or reading the story.
Okay, and the final lesson, number 10, feels like practical advice. Test your premise before writing the script. Why is this step so vital? What happens if you skip it?
Well, skipping it is how you end up doing draft after draft after draft, trying to fix fundamental problems that were baked in from the start because the premise wasn't solid.
Ugh, wasted effort.
Totally. Or worse, you finish the whole thing and realize it's just kind of boring because the core idea wasn't compelling enough.
So how do you test it? What questions should you ask?
Truby suggests asking things like, is this genuinely emotionally engaging? Do I have a clear hero in a conflict that forces action? Are the stakes really high enough to matter to someone?
And does it feel fresh? Does it stand out?
Exactly. Does it offer something unique compared to other stories like it? If you can't confidently say yes to those, you probably need to go back and refine that core sentence.
It really highlights the difference, doesn't it? Like compare a weak premise, a guy goes on a road trip.
So what?
Right, but compare it to the premise for The Judge. A dying man takes his estranged son on a road trip to reconnect before it's too late.
Night and day difference.
Instantly clear, high stakes, emotional core, specific relationship conflict. It's all there.
That simple sentence tells you so much more and promises a much richer story. It proves the value of honing that premise.
So, stepping back and looking at the big picture, Truby's whole approach really emphasizes that putting in the work up front, really refining that premise, it pays off massively down the line.
Or absolutely. It saves you so much pain later. It's about building your house on solid rock instead of sand. Every decision you make afterwards, plot points, character choices, dialogue, it all stems from and serves that strong, clear premise. It ensures the whole structure is sound.
So, for anyone listening, understanding these 10 lessons, it really gives you a new way to look at stories, doesn't it? You start seeing the underlying architecture, that DNA in the movies and books you love. You notice why certain stories grab you right from the first description.
Yeah.
It really is like getting a shortcut to understanding narrative craft.
Yeah, demystifies it a bit. And it raises a question, I think, how could applying these ideas change how you tell stories?
Yeah, not just for writing fiction, right?
No, absolutely not. Think about presenting an idea at work or pitching a project or even just telling an anecdote to make a point. Having a clear core idea, a hero, maybe the idea itself, a conflict, the problem it solves, stakes. These principles apply broadly.
That's a great point. Okay, so here's a final thought for you to chew on. Given how absolutely critical Truby argues the premise is, think about a simple story idea you might have kicked around, maybe just a note on your phone. Could you distill that idea into a single compelling sentence using these principles? Make it clear, give it a hero, conflict, stakes, maybe a twist. And then, stepping back, how might seeing stories through this lens change how you watch movies or read books from now on? Will you start spotting that premise DNA everywhere?
Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. We'll leave you with that. Catch you on the next deep dive.